Hello, fellow Wasteland Wanderers, and welcome back to the Bigger Pixel with your host, the Gaming Mandroid. And today we're going to be looking at all of the perks on the Perception skill tree in Fallout 4 and examining which ones are worth your time and which ones you should pass up. So let's start by seeing what a point in perception can do for you. Well, with every point in perception, your accuracy in VATS will increase, essentially giving you greater range with all weapons. You will also have a bonus to your chances of succeeding at pickpocketing, and picking locks will also be easier. Ironically enough, these last two effects are rather imperceivable, if you ask me. They are minor bonuses. What the true value of a point in perception is an increase in accuracy for all weapons, excluding melee weapons, which will essentially have a 95% chance to succeed regardless of your perception as long as you are within range for a VATS melee strike. The first slot in the perception tree is the Pickpocket perk, which will let you be the thief you've always wanted, searching through people's inventory and stealing as you please. With each rank, you will gain a 25% chance to succeed when pickpocketing. However, at the second rank, you will also have the ability to place a live grenade inside a person's inventory. There is a chance to be detected when placing items in someone's inventory, as there is when taking items out of someone's inventory. Also, at the third rank, you will gain the ability to steal equipped weapons. You won't even be able to see equipped items until you gain the perks that are relevant to let you take those items. And at the fourth rank, you will also be able to steal all equipped items, including armor, essentially. So, is this perk worth it? Well, essentially, this is only going to gain you money and rarely going to gain you anything that you can't gain simply by killing the enemy. So really, this is only useful when stealing from NPCs that you would prefer not to kill anyways. And it still comes with a risk of being attacked. Unfortunately, in Fallout, we don't have a detailed crime and punishment system like in other Elder Scroll games, in Skyrim for example, where getting caught pickpocketing, you have options. Sure, the guards are going to rush up to you and it might end up with you losing your stolen items, but you can regain those stolen items and you can pay gold to avoid the hassle, or if you really want, you can go full-on outlaw and start attacking everyone in town if you want. Fallout 4 does not offer you this nuance when doing things like pickpocketing. If you are caught, virtually everyone in the room around you is just going to start attacking you, regardless of whether they are quest important or not. And this can be incredibly infuriating when you're dealing with NPCs who are marked essential, because there is essentially no way to calm them at all, making the overall act of pickpocketing friendly NPCs in almost exclusively save scumming technique, because there's just no point. Once if you don't want an NPC to be angry at you forever, then you better save before you try to steal from them, and if they detect you, you better load that save. So basically you have to save scum to make pickpocketing worth it, because all of the other NPCs that you are willing to kill, pickpocketing from them is only going to give you access to an inventory that you can access from them after you kill them anyways. So it's not really going to win you new items. Now, there are a couple of these side abilities that are useful. Placing a grenade in a person's inventory can be useful to sneak characters if that is their attempt, if they have low damage output and they want to just put a grenade right on someone. That'll pretty much always kill the enemy that you do it to. However, it's a little counterproductive to the stealth people, which are really the only ones I can see using it, because it makes a very loud sound and calls the attention of many enemies nearby. Now, stealing equipped weapons. This could be good for a pacifist or stealth build. It does allow you to significantly weaken, along with the ability at the final rank to take their armor. You can significantly weaken enemies and make yourself much more combat viable against them when they have no weapons and no armor. You don't have to be very strong to win at that point. It's just a battle of attrition. However, this technique is tedious to pull off, and it's also going to be a headache in your inventory, as even just unequipping one character, a single NPC, is going to give you probably 30 pounds of gear in your inventory as you take off each piece of their armor and a gun. And the better equipped they are, aka the larger incentive to actually do this, the heavier the equipment is going to be. And that's going to take up all of your inventory, and it's just not useful to you if you're also over encumbered at the moment. So it becomes a silly inventory juggle in which you pull all the items off of them, they go into your inventory, and you immediately drop all of those. And then you might theoretically need to repeat this process for several enemies in the room, at which point you can reveal yourself and start attacking. Why do all this when you can sneak attack them or something like that and just get it over with? It's just a headache of a strategy, and it's only effective against humanoid NPCs that use guns. For example, there is no armor or weapons to pickpocket off of a Mirelurk. It's not going to win you anything. I do believe you can put the grenade in a Mirelurk's inventory. I do believe that all creatures have inventories, but overall, this perk has very limited usefulness. Very, very limited usefulness. I would say pass it up. It's only a good utility skill, I'd say, for the second rank. That's the only thing that I could recommend about this perk, is to take maybe the first 2 levels. Okay, next up, the second rank perception perk is the Rifleman perk. As with all weapon-based perks, each level will afford you 20% more damage with the relevant weapon type, which in this case is non-automatic rifles. Now, that is a broad category, and right off the bat we see why Rifleman is quite possibly the best weapon skill in this game, because there are so many weapons which pertain to Riflemen. For example, sniper rifles, combat rifles, and shotguns are all affected by the Rifleman perk, and that does not matter whether they are energy weapons or ballistic weapons. For example, the laser musket is underneath the Rifleman perk as far as what determines its damage. And why does that make the Rifleman perk probably the best weapon skill in the game? Well, it's because it's the only perk that offers you flexibility in your range at all levels. You can have very long distance attacks with sniper rifles. You can have an excellent mid-range game with some of the assault rifles, the combat rifle mainly, and you can have excellent short-range weapons with shotguns, all from a single perk. Essentially, by taking Rifleman, you don't necessarily need to take a secondary weapon skill, which I recommend with most other weapon types. If I was going to be using Gunslinger and using one-handed pistols, I would want some kind of backup skill, perhaps a perk or 2 of Rifleman for shotguns, or perhaps at least a couple perks into Demolition Expert. Just something secondary to support my low range and mediocre damage with pistols. Rifleman has the best of all worlds. It has flexible range and high damage output, so it's basically the best weapon perk in the game. But let's look at it. So for each rank, you get 20% more damage with non-automatic rifles. At the second rank, you'll ignore 15% of a target's armor. At the third rank, an additional 5%, so ignoring 20% of the armor. And then at the fourth rank, you'll ignore 25% armor and also have a chance to cripple the limb that you're targeting. And then at the final rank, on top of dealing double damage at this point, you're ignoring 30% of the target's armor and have a slightly higher chance to cripple a limb. These are all fantastic. Really, it's the armor penetration that is fantastic with this, whether it's actually crippling a limb. By the time you're level 31 and that chance is coming around, you probably don't really need to rely on crippling limbs to get by. That's really just a gimmick that sometimes helps out a lower level character beat a higher level enemy, but at level 31 you're pretty established and you're probably going to be fine. But it is nice when it goes off and you get a free cripple on something. Probably on the head, which doesn't help you very much because you're probably targeting the head to begin with. But overall, as I've said, Rifleman is a fantastic perk. If you have no particular preference on what kind of weapons you want to use in your playthrough, the strongest choice is Rifleman. That's my belief. So next up at a perception of 3 is the Awareness perk. Now the Awareness shares something in common with Vans, which is that they are the only 2 perks with only 1 level available in them, and that they're both really bad perks. So what does Awareness do? Well, it gives you stats in VATS. When you look at your enemies, you will be able to see their level number and all of their specific resistances. So you'll see 4 damage resistance numbers there for ballistic damage, energy damage, poison damage, and bleeding damage, and all of their accompanying resistances there to help you make an informed choice on what kind of weapon to use. Why is this perk not really useful and not worth it? Well, because most players are not going to be interested in carrying around several different copies of their weapons that deal either radiation, ballistic, or energy damage. Most players are just going to stick with whatever weapons they like to use, and if a certain enemy has resistances, they're probably just going to view those enemies as somewhat more difficult challenges rather than carrying around. I wouldn't even recommend carrying around multiple copies of your weapons, because it's just going to become a headache with your equipment load, and you'll be so close to being overburdened just by carrying around 3 different rifles that have energy, ballistic, and radiation damage, and then 3 different pistols that have energy, radiation, and ballistic damage. It's just not worth it. So you're probably not going to be caring about what these enemies' resistances are very much, and you can figure out what their resistances are kind of intuitively anyways by playing, or you could look it up on a wiki and find out what their resistances are, so that's really not very useful. It is a little bit useful to be able to see enemies' levels, because enemies with the same name, the game can be a little bit misleading at times. For example, you see a raider, and you know that a raider is like the base low level of a raider, of all the different types of raiders, right? And then there's like Raider Scum, and you know Raider Scum is like a little bit stronger than Raider, right? But the thing is that the game can scale with you in certain areas. So a Raider in one area might be level 1, but a Raider in another area might be level 13. You know, so seeing the levels next to these characters can help you, because the names are often not enough for you to actually know the level of these enemies. For example, it can be very misleading when you come across a legendary and you assume he's going to be very tough, but it actually turns out you kill him very quickly, because although he is a legendary, he's a level 8 legendary and you are level 35. So it's really not much of a challenge. So basically this can be useful when perhaps judging a situation and picking out that one enemy that actually is a higher level than you in the crowd, and being well informed when going into battle. But outside of that, it is not very useful. You really can get by throughout the entire game without ever taking it. In fact, I have never taken it personally. Now, you will see in some of the footage in our various videos that we have the Awareness perk in some cases, even though it's not listed on our perk list. Well, we just do that for the viewer's sake, really, so that they can have a little bit more context and see the levels of the enemies that we're attacking, just so that everything is just kind of in perspective more often. So we sometimes take Awareness for that, for the purposes of making our videos, but for the actual game, there's really no need for the Awareness perk. Only if you really feel like you want to scout out a situation and see where the tough enemies and the weak enemies are in that crowd as you approach an encounter, then you might want to take it. And to be honest, for just 1 perk point, it's not that bad a cost to gain that ability. But overall, there are much better choices for a perk point. A perk point is precious, and Awareness is simply not necessary. So up next with a perception of 4 is the Locksmith perk, and Locksmith will allow you to pick all the locks that you want and get access to all of the best loot, or perhaps bypass certain areas in encounters by going through a shortcut doorway that you otherwise would not have access to. Now, unlike in the Elder Scrolls games, getting the perks in locksmithing does not necessarily make the sweet spot easier. It's actually a better perk in certain senses, because it is now a required perk if you want to pick an advanced lock, you have to have the first rank of Locksmith in Fallout 4. Unlike in, for example, Skyrim, where even without a single perk into lockpicking, you could at least attempt to pick any lock even up to a master level, even from your character's level 1. This is no longer an option in Fallout 4. If you want to pick locks, you're going to have to invest perks in locksmithing. So, because your hands are tied, this does end up being a fairly valuable perk. Of course, at the first rank, you have access to the advanced locks. At the second, you have access to expert locks. At the third, you gain access to master locks. At the fourth rank, you will have unbreakable bobby pins. Basically, you'll have the skeleton key from Skyrim or Oblivion. Skeleton key's been around for a long time, actually. However, this perk is worthless. The fourth rank, that is. Do not take the fourth rank of Locksmith. Please don't take it. It is a wasted perk. Bobby pins are very plentiful. You can find as many of them as you want, and the lockpicking in general in Fallout 4 is much easier than it has been in past games. So even with just a little bit of experience, you will probably have very few problems picking locks and saving up your bobby pins. In fact, after only about 10 hours of gameplay, you'll probably have a nice pool of about 50 bobby pins built up that you'll just never, that those will just never go away. And eventually you'll just have 99 plus, and you won't even be keeping track anymore. So, overall, is this perk worth it? Well, I struggle to say yes, because there are ways to get these doors open even without the perk. You can always get Kate as your companion and have her pick locks. Now, that is a headache when you want to open up a master lock, because there is no guarantee that she'll succeed, and it can take a very long time, and there have been cases when I just ran out of patience and left the lock as it was anyways, because Kate couldn't pick it, and neither could I. Now, this is an option to you to do that. However, the bottom line is, I've had several playthroughs where I didn't put a single perk into this, and I didn't carry around Kate, and I just ignored all locks except for novice locks. And the truth is, the game goes out of its way to make sure that nothing that you have to do is behind an advanced lock, just like nothing that you have to do is behind an advanced terminal. Anything that you must do, you will have access to anyways, and it might be behind a novice lock at worst. And everything else is just optional. There may be good loot back there, but in the end, you can get by without it. So this perk is mediocre. However, it is a perk of convenience. It can really save a lot of time, and it's really a headache to have to use Kate in certain situations, because there's always a couple of things that you do want, specific items that you know of. So Locksmith will give you the independence that you probably want, especially if you're also using Lone Wanderer. Then you're really going to need things like locksmithing and hacking. Need is an exaggeration, but this perk is right in the middle on whether it's useful or not. Next up, with a perception of 5, is the Demolition Expert perk. Now, this is a perk that I feel a lot of people might have overlooked just because I see so few recommending its use or having it in play in virtually any Fallout 4 footage that you see. And it's pretty obvious to tell when someone has it in play or not, because they'll have the grenade arc. But anyways, it is essentially a weapon skill, so it has 4 ranks instead of 5, unlike Gunslinger, Commando, Heavy Weapons, all of those. Generally, they have a standard of 5 perk levels. Demolition Expert is a little bit leaner, with only 4 perks altogether, which is very nice, actually. So it means that at each rank, you gain 25% damage with explosives. Also, at the first rank, you will gain the ability to craft explosives at a chemistry station. Now, this is a little misleading, because to make the best explosives, you're going to need the Science perk as well, which I think is annoying. I'll talk about Science when we get to our Intelligence series, but Science is the perk that bleeds out onto everything and makes you really annoyed that you don't have enough intelligence, because anyways. So with the first rank of Demolition Expert, what you'll specifically gain access to being able to craft is baseball grenades and then fragmentation grenades or mines. Anything else you'll need science for to build. That's the plasma grenades, the energy grenades, whatever they're called, pulse grenades, I guess, and the cryo grenades, which are cool and do more damage, but Demolition Expert won't get you those per se. At the second rank, you will gain a grenade throwing arc that displays on your screen whenever you throw a grenade, as well as at that point 50% more damage. The grenade arc is very useful for really placing those Molotovs or whatever you're throwing right where you want it, and also for predicting the path to attempt to shoot the grenade in midair, which can be an effective tactic when you use VATS to shoot it in midair. That can give you the ability to really control your explosion and who you're damaging. At the third rank, you'll be doing 75% damage and have a greater area of effect with grenades or mines. Any explosions, in fact. Now, at this point, it does become a little bit risky to yourself. You need to be more careful. Perhaps get the dense armor mods, because with the larger area of effect, these explosions can, of course, harm and kill you, and they are doing a lot of damage at this point with 75% bonus. At the final level, your explosives do double damage, and it says that mines and grenades shot in VATS explode for double damage too. Now, just to clarify on the wording of that perk, I am essentially making an assumption, but I am pretty confident about what they mean by that. Now, if you were to throw your own grenade, say at rank 3, and pause in VATS and shoot it in midair, I believe that it would already have that 75% damage bonus. I believe what the fourth rank is referring to when it says mines shot in VATS or grenades shot in VATS explode for double damage too, as if it was not the case before. What they mean is your enemy's grenades. So it is possible if an enemy pulls out a grenade and they throw it at you, you can pause VATS and shoot that, perhaps in their hand as they're about to throw it, to make it explode. Well, before the fourth rank, those mines and grenades are not owned by the player, and therefore they are not receiving the damage bonus until you get the fourth rank of Demolition Expert, at which point both your explosives and enemies' explosives that you choose to trigger will also deal double damage. So, final thought, this perk is definitely worth it. It's a fantastic secondary weapon type for any character, any play type, especially when you consider that its effects can stack with any explosive weapons and the explosive legendary effect, which is incredible. So basically, Demolition Expert can stack on top of mainly the Heavy Gunner perk to deal incredible damage with things like the Missile Launcher, Fat Man, and the Cannon. Next up, with a perception of 6, you will gain access to the Night Person perk. This perk has only 2 ranks, and at the first level you will gain +2 to intelligence and perception between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Basically, you are smarter and more perceptive, more accurate in VATS at nighttime. When the sun is down, there will be cases at 6:30, 7 o'clock. It still looks like the sun is up, but you're gaining that perk. And this does work with your internal clock within the game. It does not matter whether you are outside, whether you can see that it is night, or whether sunlight is on you or not. That does not matter. It's purely dependent upon the time of day. At the second rank, you will gain an additional point to intelligence and perception, so +3 to each of those between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., and you will also gain night vision when sneaking. Now, is this perk worth it? Well, let's talk about the night vision. That's not very useful at all. It is a subtle effect, which is a good thing, because unfortunately it's not an optional effect when you crouch. Once you've taken this perk, every time you crouch, it will do this, even during the day, which is rather annoying. It leaves a rather poor visual effect on the screen, especially when it's very bright out, and it does this fade for the night vision. So that's pretty annoying, and it's not that useful. Ultimately, if you're having difficulty seeing in the game, I recommend you just turn your brightness up a little bit. You don't need this perk. Now, the perk overall for both levels is okay, mainly for the benefit to intelligence. It can be very useful for maximizing your experience gain. Turning in quests at night, for example, is a great way to reliably boost your experience income. So it can be useful, I think, in some cases, but ultimately I would consider it a perk that only has appeal to me for role-playing, perhaps for a thief. It just makes me feel a little bit cool to have the night vision. With 7 perception, you will have the ability to take the Refractor perk. With each point in the Refractor perk, you gain an additional +10 to your energy resistance. Now, there isn't too much to say about this. It's a pretty straightforward perk. It's just like Rad Resistant or Toughness, except with the energy damage resistance, of course. Now, is this useful? Well, I would rank all 3 of those perks as varying levels of not useful. The bottom line is that +10 energy resistance might be noticeable at level 1, and so on and so forth, up to about level 3, the perk level 3, and you're at level 21. After that, by the time you're level 35, an additional 10 energy resistance is meaningless. At level 42, an additional 10 energy resistance is meaningless. So basically, unless you have for some reason a specific deficiency in energy resistance, perhaps because you're playing favorites on a particular armor piece that has very poor energy resistance, then I don't see why you would take this. And you'll hear me say similar things about toughness and rad resistance soon enough, no doubt. Next up at the 8th rank of perception is the sniper perk, and while this is a fun one, it is a bittersweet one, I would say. Now, at the 1st rank, you have improved control and can hold your breath longer when aiming with scopes. At the 2nd rank, non-automatic scoped rifles have a chance of knocking down your target. At the 3rd rank, non-automatic scoped rifles gain plus 25% accuracy for headshots in VATS. Now, this perk is pretty good if you're doing exactly what this perk wants you to do, which is play at long ranges and use sniper rifles. Now, for example, in our Huntsman build that we are currently working on with the bigger pixel, this is a perfect perk. And it can be very fun. You have a decent chance. I don't know what the exact percentage is on your chance to knock down a target, but it happens reasonably often. And if you use, for example, a combat rifle with a short scope on it, and you're using that at, kind of mid-range, then you'll have a greater chance. Now, when you're using that long-range, big, maximum damage headshot rifle, you're probably killing something in one shot anyway. So, what are the odds that you're going to knock down your enemy, and what are the odds that it will be relevant in any way? But with the weaker rifles at mid-range, that ability can be useful. And just being able to hold your breath longer and aim is also very useful, because with low agility and low endurance, that can be a real headache. You can burn through your AP really fast just trying to line up a shot. So really, the 1st level is the most useful. The 2nd level is contextually useful. And the 3rd level is pretty great, but not necessary. For me, when I'm playing with scoped rifles, 25% accuracy to headshots is nothing to sneeze at. But when I'm playing with my sniper rifle and my scope, half the fun is that I'm doing it outside of VATS. I mean, you can't even zoom in. Why rely on VATS for a headshot with your sniper when you can just crouch, sneak down, be at a long range, and line up the headshot yourself? So it's probably, I would say, actually the least useful rank is the final rank, despite the fact that it's pretty good. So overall, if you are already using non-automatic, long-ranged scope rifles as part of your playthrough, then this is a good perk to pick up. Is it worth it to pour points into perception just to get to 8 to get sniper? No, I wouldn't say so. So it's contextual, but this is an okay perk. So getting to the top tier perks at 9 perception, you will have access to the Penetrator perk, which has only 2 ranks. And in the 1st rank, you will gain the ability to target enemies' limbs that are blocked by cover, although this will come with a decrease in accuracy. In the second rank, you will be able to do the same, but there will be no decrease in accuracy. So basically, this allows you to fire through cover into an enemy. Now, is this useful? Well, I'd say it's really not that useful. For example, let me put it to you this way. Only humanoid creatures in the first place will even have the AI to take cover. So already this has a limited appeal to bandits, raiders, gunners, super mutants, synths, and the like. Basically, humanoid type enemies are the only ones that are going to be taking cover on you anyways. Second of all, this ability does not have the awesome effect that I thought it would have, which is that I would be able to pull up VATS in any room and essentially target enemies completely through walls and perhaps shoot up through the ceiling at an enemy. If you could do that, this would be an outstanding perk for snipers especially, who don't even want to get close range and enter buildings and just want to fire straight through windows and kill people. That would be perfect, but that's not really how this works. You can only target an enemy in VATS if you have a line of sight on them in the first place. So basically, part of them needs to be exposed for this perk to be relevant anyways, because you can't target any part of them if they're completely behind cover. If you can't see them, you can't target them in VATS. So generally, its usefulness will only apply to, say, the legs of a bandit as he leans out over a sandbag. And guess what? In a case like that, why would you want to fire at his legs anyways? It's just not very useful. You probably just want to shoot him in the head at that point. So overall, the Penetrator perk is pretty underwhelming. I would say pass it up. Even though it is a top tier, it's really one of the worst top tier perks on the entire list. And now we have the penultimate perk of the Perception Tree, Concentrated Fire. It has 3 ranks, and at the first rank, you will gain plus 10% accuracy for each additional shot on the same body part. At the second level, that increases to plus 15% accuracy, and at the third level, that increases to plus 20% accuracy for every attack, and plus 20% more damage for every attack. Now, just so that you understand how this perk works, basically it will never have an effect on your first shot on any opponent's body part. You need to put at least 2 shots into the same body part in the same opponent within the same VATS encounter, all within 1 AP bar, essentially. You can't exit VATS and then come back in and get the effect again. However, it does stack. So for example, if I have the 3rd rank of Concentrated Fire, and I put 3 shots, cue all 3, onto the head of an enemy. On the second shot, I will have plus 20% accuracy and plus 20% damage, and on the third shot, I will have plus 40% accuracy and plus 40% damage. Now, it's that final perk level that gives you the 20% damage increase per consecutive shot that makes this perk fantastic. The first 2 ranks are not that great. If you have a perception of 10, which you must to get this perk, then you are probably already very accurate in VATS, and this increased accuracy is not really going to do that much more for you, because you probably already had a really good chance to hit someone anyways. But when it gets into the damage boosts at level 50 with the 3rd rank of this perk, that is when it becomes essentially one of the best top tier rank 10 perks on the entire list. If you combine this with Gun Fu and Gunslinger, you can deal massive amounts of damage. So this is a good perk, but do you really want to put 10 perception into your character just for this perk? I think in a lot of cases the answer is unfortunately no. However, in and of itself, it is quite potent. So that just about wraps it up with our examination of the perception tree. We've looked at all the perks, so it only leaves us to ruminate on the value of the tree itself and how does it rank against some of the other special stats and their respective trees. Well, there are a few standout perks. The number one is definitely Rifleman because it requires such low investment and is essentially one of the best perks in the game. Next would be Locksmith. While it has essentially universal appeal, virtually any character has an interest in increased loot, it can essentially be done without. Demolition Expert is also fantastic as a secondary weapon type with a low perk investment relatively. And finally, Concentrated Fire can be a powerful tool with the right build. It's only going to be effective with weapons that have a low AP cost, which does narrow down your options. So, overall, how is this tree? Well, it's mediocre at best, unfortunately. It ranks probably as our third worst, maybe, so that would put us at about 5th place, I'd say, out of all of the perk trees. Why is that? Well, because really all you need it for, a lot of the perks focus on the same thing, which is giving you increased accuracy. But the bottom line is that you don't even need to take those perks to feel the accuracy, to get the accuracy that any character really wants. All you have to do is boost the stat itself. And it's actually very, very easy to boost the perception stat without actually investing in it at a high level from your character build. I would virtually never recommend a character put high perk point special stat investment into perception at the start of their build. Why? Because it's so easy to boost perception. It's the first bobblehead that you get. It's practically handed to you in the first quest that you're going to do after leaving the vault. Not to mention, it's very easy to boost with equipment. There are many, many hats that give you +1 perception, plus the eyewear slot, which most of which will give you +1 perception, plus the relative frequency of the cunning legendary armor effect, which offers +1 agility and +1 perception. The Minuteman outfit starts with that effect, for example. The prevalence of that armor drop and just a lot of other factors, even mentats. You can make mentats for heaven's sake. So that's certainly not rare. It's really easy to boost your perception. So it's unlikely that your character warrants a high investment in this special stat. Now, unless you want one of those specific perks, perception overall is something that you can put at about 3, I'd say, tops, and get by just fine with most character builds. So that does it for now, and we are finished with our perception video. I hope this information was useful to you, and thank you for tuning in to the end. As always, if you enjoyed this video, if you want to see more Fallout 4 content, please leave a thumbs up, tell us what you want to see in the comment section, and share our page to any of your friends who might be interested. That helps us out a lot and keeps us moving towards our goal of giving you even more, even better content all the time. So stay tuned to the Bigger Pixel, and next week we'll be putting out our 3rd video on the endurance perk list in Fallout 4. So stay tuned with that, and I will be back with you, as always, your host, the Gaming Mandroid.